Control.
Control, 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 controls, controls, control, 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 controlled, control, 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 controls, control, the controls, control, controls, controls, control, 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 controls, control, 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 controls, control, 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 controls, controls, control, 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 controls, control, controlling, control,
Consented. Consent.
consent, consent,
Consent.
consent,
Consent, consent,
consent, consent, consent, consent, consent,
consent, consent, consent, consent, consent, consent, consent, consent, consenting,
consented,
consented, consented,
consent,
consent, consent,
consent, consent, consent,
Consent, consent, consent, consent,
consent,
consent.
Content.
content,
content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content,
content,
content, content, content,
Content.
content, the content,
content, content, content,
content,
content, content, content,
Content. 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 Content.
content, 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 content,
content,
content, content,
content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content,
Content.
content, content,
content,
content, content, content, content, content, content, content,
content, content,
content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content,
Content.
content, content,
content, content, content,
content, content, the content, content, content,
content, content,
content, content, content, content,
Content. Content.
content,
content, content,
content, content, content, content, content, content, content, content.
When it first arrived from Amazon, I didn't know what it was. What is it?
You'll see.
Is it for me?
It's for everyone. It's called Amazon Echo.
How's it going?
I'm just finishing up right now.
Is it on?
Oh, it's always on.
Can it hear me right now?
Nope. It only hears you when you use the wake word we chose. Alexa.
Well, what does it do?
Alexa, what do you do?
I can play music, answer questions, get the news and weather, create to-do lists, and much more.
Awesome. Alexa, play rock music.
Rock music.
Alexa, stop.
Wait, I want to try. Alexa, what time is it?
The time is 3:27.
You actually don't have to yell at it, okay? It uses far-field technology so it can hear you from anywhere in the room.
So it can just hear you anywhere?
Yes. Well, everyone can hear you anyway.
Oh, is that where we're going to put it?
I was thinking of putting it there, but it works anywhere.
Echo is pretty neat because it knows all sorts of things.
It's on
All you have to do is ask.
Alexa, how tall is Mount Everest?
Mount Everest's height is 29,029 feet, 8,848 meters.
How can it know so much? It's so small.
It updates using the cloud. That's also how it gets its
You
answers.
just read that off the box, huh?
Dad really likes that Echo just plugs in, so we never have to charge it. Plus, Echo's really good at keeping track of things like shopping and to-do lists.
Paper. Alexa, add wrapping paper to the shopping list.
I've put wrapping paper on your shopping list.
Alexa, how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon?
1 tablespoon equals 3 teaspoons.
Okay. Alexa, set a timer for 8 minutes.
8 minutes starting now.
With everything Echo can do, it's really become part of the family.
To experience Echo, go to
Paperwork. Nobody loves it, but unfortunately, there's just no avoiding it. When you and your business are inundated with paperwork, it can add up to a real documentation headache. And the result can mean missed deadlines, inefficient reporting, or worse. What if we told you there was a better way? That's right, your voice. In fact, there's never been a better time to put your voice to work for you and your business, anywhere, anytime. Thanks to Dragon Professional Speech Recognition Solutions from Nuance. Dragon works across any device to enable mobile workers, professionals, groups, and businesses to keep up with documentation demands, simply by speaking.
How do you measure and manage customer experience? Your contact center data can provide a rich understanding of customer experience and business outcomes. Most businesses only measure 5% of conversations, leaving data siloed and inaccessible. What if you could measure 100% of your contact center interactions leveraging voice data to fuel business growth. VoiceBase provides authentic voice insights in tandem with all your metadata directly in your business intelligence tool, like Tableau. What your customers tell you today will be in your financials tomorrow. Leverage the power of voice data to understand the true voice of the customer. Automatically redact sensitive PCI or card data to avoid costly compliance fines. Monitor agent performance and happiness, even remotely. Join Fortune 500 enterprises around the globe who power digital transformation and accelerate growth with AI-powered voice analytics from VoiceBase.
Welcome to Auto Assistant, now available for any major video platform. You can configure your Auto Assistant to auto-join your meetings and auto-share your meeting notes. At any time, you can disable Auto Assistant from joining or sharing on a per-meeting basis. Auto Assistant can auto-join your meetings scheduled through your calendar, or direct Auto Assistant to join meetings not on your calendar. Auto Assistant will take notes for you in real time, engage and collaborate with meeting participants by highlighting, inserting images, and adding comments.
Did you know clinicians spend up to 1/3 of their day at computers, away from patients? What if there was a technology that decreased the amount of time your clinicians spent in front of computers and increased their face time with patients? Imagine what that extra bedside time would mean to your hospital, your clinicians, and most of all, your patients. Introducing Voice First, a voice-controlled, two-way interactive system that allows clinicians to input and access data from their EMR hands-free at the point of care. Voice First recognizes natural speaking patterns. During an assessment, a nurse can simply ask,
"Last potassium level,"
and the Voice First system immediately responds.
"The last potassium level at 8:06 a.m. was 5.1.
When the nurse wants to record patient information during an assessment, they simply speak.
"Abdomen, soft, no tenderness. Bowel sounds positive."
And Voice First automatically populates data into the correct EMR field, regardless of the order it's received. It's that easy. Imagine complete mobility for your clinicians. Imagine the freedom to access everything you need with just your voice.
The technology that makes all this go round is automatic speech recognition. Automatic speech recognition is how we interface and fail to interface with our voice assistants, smart devices, and customer service agents. It's how governments and advertisers profile and surveil us. How YouTube, Zoom, courts, medical providers, and universities process the words we say for archiving, analysis, and exploitation. Automatic speech recognition is machine listening's most charismatic application, as well as its major commercial success. It's how some of the world's biggest and most powerful companies maintain the pretense of futurism. It is Star Trek. It is 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is Amazon's Blue Origin. It is a Super Bowl ad starring Michael B. Jordan.
I literally couldn't imagine a more beautiful vessel for Alexa to be inside. Alexa, how many tablespoons are in a cup?
There are 16 tablespoons in a cup.
Speech recognition, more than any other technology, is habituating us to a world of networked microphones. It's teaching us to expect our machines to listen, training us to want them to, presenting this as natural.
Speech is the most natural way to communicate.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to ask questions.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to express ourselves.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to get things done.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to integrate with our biometric authentication and fraud prevention solutions. Speech is the most natural way to communicate.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to ask questions.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to express ourselves.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to get things done.
Let's talk.
Speech is the most natural way to integrate with our biometric authentication and fraud prevention solutions. Speech is the most natural way to communicate.
But speech recognition isn't yet naturalized. It fails too often, frequently along familiar lines of race, gender, disability, class, and geography, so that the consequences of misrecognition aren't evenly distributed. You ask Siri a question. Siri doesn't hear it right. Maybe it's a bank, or your doctor, or the tax office. So you try again, enunciating differently, bending your voice to the winds of the machine, learning to speak for the technology, trying to learn how it listens.
Alexa.
Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the capability. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the contacts. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the syntax. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the stocks. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the dollars. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the directions. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the software. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the meaning. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the technology. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the audience. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the applications. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the services. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the words. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the microphone. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the context. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the language. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the everything. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the maps. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the businesses. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the seconds. Let's go ahead and ask Siri about the messages.
In fact, it's not quite right to call speech recognition a technology. It's more like a desire, something people have wanted for a long time, or at least some people anyway. How this desire is expressed technologically, and the political and economic interest it's made to serve, is constantly changing. Long before speech recognition was reimagined for the purposes of advertising and surveillance, it was a way of controlling robots and automating secretarial labor and call routing services. The major players were the US military, Bell Telephone, and IBM. But the first system to operate anything remotely like the ones we use today was built by D.B. Fry and Peter Deans, two experimental phoneticians at University College London in 1960.
This film shows you the working of a particular type of mechanical speech recognizer. The recognizer, in its present form, is assembled on the racks that you see here. The speech input is coming from the tape replay unit on the left.
Shooter, she, shirker, martyr, market.
The final output is provided by the electrically operated typewriter that you can see in the middle.
Loom, lurk, loon, learn, tarn, turn, soon.
The following diagrams show the principles of operation and the component parts of the machine. The sounds are recognized by combining information from two sources. The Acoustical Analyzer examines the characteristics of the speech wave. The store of linguistic knowledge gives information about diagram frequencies. Every time a speech sound is fed into the machine, the computer combines the two types of information and decides what sound is to be recognized. It then instructs the typewriter to type the appropriate symbol. We are now going to end the film by showing you a sample of the output of the machine in simplified spelling.
Ta, teat, teak, team, calm, keel, keen, toot, seam, scene, suit, shark, meek, meal, mean, moot, lean, loot.
A decade later, Raj Reddy began work on another pioneering speech recognition system, that, along with similar work being conducted at Carnegie Mellon and MIT, would go on to receive funding from the US Department of Defense's Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA. For this and related contributions to the field of speech recognition, Reddy won the Turing Award in 1994.
At Stanford, we have been interested in man-machine voice communication for over 4 years. Although the research is by no means complete, we would like to show you some results obtained as of autumn 1968. Our work is based on the analysis and classification of speech waves. Waves representing the changes in air pressure caused by our speech. This is a display of the waveform for the phrase, please. Analysis of such a wave poses many problems. Notice that it is impossible to say where one sound ends and another begins, or where one word ends and another begins. In normal speech, sounds and words flow into one another with no apparent boundaries. Thus the phrase ice cream is ambiguous. So, for the time being, we restrict ourselves to the recognition of a limited set of isolated words or phrases, or a few simple constructs made out of these. For the purpose of analysis, we break down each utterance into quasi-linguistic units. This is an example of the analysis performed by the computer for the utterance 7, the real-time operation of the program by means of 2 examples. How are you?
Pick up the big block at the right side.
This illustrates the operation of the hand-eye-ear program. The whole program takes about 75,000 words of core. It takes about 15 to 30 seconds from the time the command is given to the time the operation is completed. Language design for man-machine voice communication has proved to be tedious and should be automated. These and other problems will be solved within the next few years. And although we may not be able to speak with machines as incoherently as we can with people, a cooperative speaker will probably be able to speak to computers in simplified English.
Speaking. It's one of the most natural things we do. It's also the basis of a remarkable research project at IBM. This is an experimental computer system that recognizes what I say. I talk, and my words appear on the computer screen. It has a business vocabulary of thousands of words, and it even knows the difference between words that sound alike but have different meanings. Watch this. Please write to Mrs. Wright right now. This computer system is another example of innovation at IBM. In fact, it's the most advanced voice recognition system of its kind, period.
This is AT&T. Please say, collect, calling card, third number, person to person, or operator, now.
Collect.
All right. Thank you for your collect call. At the tone, please say your name.
CJ.
Thank you. Please hold for billing acceptance.
Mercedes Tech.
You have an AT&T collect call from
CJ.
Please say yes if you accept the charges. Thank you for using AT&T.
Okay, that one was good.
In
In 1991, AT&T conducted a field trial of a system that recognizes the human voice and responds to its commands. Many believe that voice recognition technology will be used in several future services. But this operator call handling system represents AT&T's first and widest application to date. As in the past, whenever AT&T developed a new technology, it caused employees some very real concerns about their jobs, about their future. This program will present the thoughts and feelings, the many voices affected by this new technology. It was produced so that everyone involved within AT&T can better understand the issues and, collectively, move forward in a way that best serves its employees, its customers, and its shareholders.
Start Microsoft Word. Dan, comma, you need to try speech recognition instead of typing, period. My realtor introduced me to Dragon Naturally Speaking, period. Huge time saver. Bold that.
Create new mail. Mitch, comma, contract signed, exclamation, insert signature, send mail.
Even my son's a big fan.
The history of civilization is so uncivilized. Switch to I am. I am in. Send.
Speech recognition.
Dragon grew out of work like Reddy's, also thanks to DARPA backing. It was later acquired by a company called Nuance, a self-professed pioneer and leader in conversational AI innovations, whose markets include healthcare, telecoms, automotive, financial services, and retail. In April 2021, Nuance was bought by Microsoft for $19.7 billion, or $55 a share, only $8 less than Twitter. IBM remains a major player in speech recognition for business, along with cloud computing. Watson, its portfolio of business-ready tools, applications, and solutions, is currently used by 70% of the world's banks. After introducing voice recognition call processing in 1992, AT&T laid off more than 6,000 human operators, just as they had protested the company would. We try to make the distinction between the individual and the job, one manager at AT&T explained. It's not that you are being fired, it's the job that's being eliminated.
Speaking. It's one of the most natural things we do. It's also the basis of a remarkable research project at IBM. This is an experimental computer system that recognizes what I say. I talk, and my words appear on a computer screen. It has a business vocabulary, thousands of words, and it even knows the difference between words that sounded like have different meanings. Watch this. Please write to Mrs. Wright right now. This computer system is another example of innovation at IBM. In fact, voice recognition of its kind, period.
How immersed in the technology do we need to be? How dirty do we have to get our hands in order to be able to speak about it accurately, in order to formulate effective critique? If critique needs to operate more or less on the level of the thing it's critiquing, what would that mean in the case of machine listening and the automatic recognition of speech? For unnatural language processing, we have built a word processor based on a transcription and phonetic alignment system provided by Reduct, which is a US-based company co-founded by the artist Robert Ochshorn. We think of the word processor as an instrument. It's a tool for doing things with words, like a typewriter or a smart speaker, auto-tune or a synthesizer, a database or a stethoscope. We built this instrument as a way of getting to know speech recognition, the pedagogy of tinkering, like messing around with an old radio or a circuit board, or a line of code. This is a more embodied kind of knowledge than observation or analysis. Cracking open the black box makes it possible to focus in on certain aspects of the technology and its behavior, to watch it work and fail to work over and over, to slowly puzzle out why. What kinds of things can speech recognition do, we wondered, beyond transcribing this Zoom session or reducing the barriers to e-commerce? How might it be put to work differently? Thinking and listening with the word processor gives rise to a whole range of questions. What kinds of speech could it be turned on? What kinds should it be? According to what norms or ethics? Could it be turned on itself?
Control.
Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. And
Consent.
Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control.
Consent.
Control. Content. Control.
Consent.
Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control of content. Control. Consent. Control. Contents. Control of consent.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Control. Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content. Control. Consent. Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control.
Content.
Control. Consent. Control.
Content.
Control. Consent. Control.
Content.
Control. Control. Content.
Control.
Control. Content. Control. Consent.
Control.
Content. Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control. Content. Control.
Consent.
Control. Content. Control.
Consent.
Control. Content. Control. Consent. Control.
Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content.
Control.
Consent.
Control.
Content.
Control. Consent. Control.
Content.
Whatever material the instrument is used to process, what aesthetic and political choices might it invite or preclude? How deterministic is it? How much artistic or critical agency does it offer?
Unstoppable. Technology. Unstoppable. System. Stoppable. Infrastructure. Unstoppable. Capital. Stoppable. Destiny. Unstoppable. Technology. Stoppable. System. Unstoppable. Infrastructure. Stoppable. Capital. Unstoppable. Destiny. Stoppable. Technology. Unstoppable. System. Stoppable. Infrastructure. Unstoppable. Capital. Stoppable. Destiny.
Can it be used to produce new sounds, new forms of listening? Not for their own sake, but in the knowledge that sonic innovation has always had social and political dimensions. It was never just about novelty. How might the instrument be used to denaturalize, then, or to unhear? What traditions of artistic production is an instrument like this in dialogue with? What forms of attention or patience might it invite?
The new music is like the propositions. The new music is like the subdivisions. The new music is like masterpieces. The new music is like the propositions. The new music is like the preoccupations. The new music is like the remarks. The new music is like the philosophies. The new music is like the innovations. The new music is like the inventions. The new music is like the possibilities. The new music is like the developments. The new music is like the procedures. The new music is...
How can the instrument be used to showcase or understand ways of audition not easily accessible to human listeners? Can it be used as a technique of ear training to help us tune into and compose with audiological parameters like phonemes, word energy, or pitchiness? To attune us to how this machine listens, to begin to compose with machine listenings.
Unstoppable, 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 unstoppable,
Can the word processor be used forensically? To listen back or to appropriate or subvert the surveillant methods to which speech recognition has often been put? Or perhaps instead to investigate and problematize its own shortcomings, its own failures to listen well? How, finally, might each of these experiments exceed their own hypotheses? Since listeners might always hear and understand more than is strictly intended.
Human imprecision against imprecision. 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 Human imprecision
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Machine Listening, Episode 5, Unnatural Language Processing. My name is Joel Stern. Be one of your hosts this evening. That was an intense and entertaining and kind of bleak and kind of amazing 30 minutes of just surveying the world of machine listening, automatic speech recognition, language processing. James, I don't know how you were both narrating that opening and so active in the chat at the same time. Really amazing skills there. It's about 9:30 p.m. in Naarm, so-called Melbourne, Australia, in the evening, where I am. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm on unceded Aboriginal land, and I'll pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. It'd be great for those of you watching on Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are, to let us know where you're tuning in from as well. It's so nice to see so many people here with us tonight. Hey, Sean, your camera on. Nice to see you. So Machine Listening, Episode 5, Unnatural Language processing. For those of you who are just kind of coming into the machine listening project for the first time, this is a kind of a research investigation, an ongoing project that we actually launched at Unsound Festival last year, basically 1 year ago, with 3 online episodes that were kind of like kickstarted the project. The machine listening project comprises these sort of online events alongside a kind of a big sort of research practice that you can find sort of pulled together on our website, which Elisa will drop into the chat now, or James already did it. And on the website, you'll find writings and interviews, pedagogical experiments, artistic works, and documentation of all of the episodes. So this episode, Unnatural Language Processing, as you have gathered from that opening, focuses on automatic speech recognition and language, and it kind of comes together around this instrument, the word processor, that we kind of built up to in the opening introduction there. And of course, an instrument is, not just about the tool itself, but the community of users that sort of come together. An instrument is for playing, of course. And for Unsound, we've invited a whole lot of artists, poets, composers, vocalists, theorists, activists, etc., to play with the word processor. And some of them are here tonight. Some of them are still working on ideas, and others have contributed pieces that will be playing on their behalf. And those artists that are here tonight are Alessandro Bosetti, Martina Rapone, Roslyn Orlando, Justin Clemens, Mehak Sawney, and there's also contributions from Robert Ochshorn, Tomomi Adachi, and Michael McClelland. But this event is also a launch for the word processor. And I'm going to throw to you, Sean, now, because, firstly you built the thing with Robert Ochshorn from Reduct, of course, too. And, firstly, thank you, because it's been an amazing experience over the last few months, seeing this instrument take shape and kind of playing around and experimenting with it and sharing that with so many people, including all of the artists. So, if I can invite you to maybe just reflect a little bit on the instrument and also sort of share some details about how people can access and begin to use it.
Yeah, so I've just put the link into the chat. It's been a lot of fun to make, but I know that we have lots of people to get to. So I'll just really quickly say that I've put the link to the instrument in the chat. So please go to it, and anyone who wants to. I'd say it works best in Firefox, but kind of it only works in Firefox. So please only go to it in Firefox. And when you're there, you're going to find that there's a bunch of material that you can work with that's already sort of preloaded. And there are things like talks from tech CEOs, some of the things that we used in the introduction, commercials, adverts. And there's also instructions on how to use it down in the bottom corner, and how to use the different filters and sorts and functions and things like that. So for now, you can only work with what's there, but like Joel said, part of the aim in making an instrument or a tool like that is also to try and build a community around it and to organize collective attention onto the actual workings of machine listening. So if you want help, or if you want to make something using your own material, or if you make something that you want to show, then please, just reach out by email or the Discord server, which I actually don't know what it is. So I guess just email, or maybe someone could put it in the chat. Yeah.
And what about the decision to populate it with talks by corporate CEOs?
Seems like a natural place to start, doesn't it? Sort of they're
we did start with,
listening in already. So, and also that their talks are just so oftentimes so infuriatingly kind of, I don't know, they're just like they really want to be heard. So, you know, this just gives a different way to listen.
Thanks so much, Sean. And I might also invite James to jump on too, and as we sort of introduce our first guest artists of the evening. And, you know, the session will kind of be progressively introducing artists to come in and speak with us and share things that they've been working on. And sometimes, you know, more than one artist will be kind of in the conversation at a time. And we'll kind of move over the next couple of hours through some really amazing works and hopefully some great conversations, not just about the word processor, but about the way that people are thinking about speech, computation, language, you know, sound, composing, and all of those things. And the first guest is Martina Rapone, who, if you'd like to turn your camera on, Martina, and join us. It's great to have you here. Hi, how are you? Hi. And you're joining us from Brussels this morning, is that right?
Yes, just temporarily here for a few days.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
And it's been so nice to connect with you over the last few weeks and kind of talking about this project and exchanging ideas. And so maybe I'll just sort of say very briefly, you know, that you're an artist who works with noise in a really sort of expanded context, not just sort of sonic, but in a kind of social and political and sort of philosophical way.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll just read one little sort of line from your bio, which I thought was really amazing, which was you say that your interest in noise comes from your father's deafness, and that when you were a kid, he would lay his head against your back, asking you to speak out loud, that so he could learn your voice through the vibrations of the rib cage. So, you know, I thought that was a great place to start, and maybe, invite you to sort of reflect on how, I guess, those experiences you've had growing up and thinking about noise sort of beyond, you know, audible sound in those sort of vibrational ways, how that informed the way you approached this work.
Well, I mean, I think I can start answering this question by also somehow introducing the way I worked with the tool, because throughout the last 10 years almost, I've been investigating noise, and I've always found like many limitations in the way we understand noise only in the audible, in an audible sense. So the expansion through deafhood and the deaf experience, and also as a coda, as a sort of bilingual, bicultural person, in this case, that has been trained to speak two languages, but also, I mean, sign language has only been recognized and acknowledged as an actual language only recently. So it's also weird to actually know how to speak a language that is not really a language, or people don't see it as such. And I think that there's a lot also in the deaf voice that means, that has a profound meaning for me, if we think of disruption, if we think of a shared sonic environment, and how we perceive also deaf voices. And that was my entry point, actually, to play a little bit with the instrument and see also how the instrument would recognize these voices and the limitations that it has, especially if we think of how, for example, there are components of sign languages which are sonic. So a sign can be accompanied by a specific vocalization. Like, for example, in Italian Sign Language, when you say pa, pa, that means it's not possible. If you only do this, it doesn't mean anything. You need to say this. But so they do go together. In Dutch Sign Language, when you say going out, you need to say, you don't say out gaan, but you say only out. So in that sense, the word is a component of the sign, and in that sense, isolated wouldn't mean anything somehow. So this is also somehow the point of access that I decided to take with the instrument, and sort of look at this, try to listen to these voices through the instrument and see what to do with it in a more compositional way somehow.
Yeah, and as you started to work with the computer transcription and the automatic speech recognition, what kind of results, did you find? Like as you sort of listened to these forms of speech through the machine, through the prism of the machine, were the results surprising, or did it sort of start to produce material that you could then continue to work with?
Well, the interesting thing is also the words that I could recognize, for example, in whatever sound was just identified as sound and not as speech. And I did work with that in a couple of sections of the piece that we're going to listen to later, where I tried to extract the speech of Helen Keller, the famous deafblind woman. And there's a part that was identified as sound, and but there's a voice that says something, and it seems that it says "you might die," which was pretty interesting somehow. And the same goes for also other words that then when fed back into the instrument, they go on being altered, and it's sort of weird to see also how the machine sort of alters the way it recognized previously a word, and how also that sound changes the moment it's organized in a different rhythmic pattern, or when the different words are a little bit moved around and shuffled around with other sorting logics. So that was interesting to see also the meaning that you can extract, but mostly the texture that you can extract from it.
Super. And when we first spoke, you sort of explained to me how this work kind of fits in with a larger project of yours that is a kind of speculative science fictional project, and it involves kind of otherworldly creatures and the ocean and the kind of transmission of sound and the indexing of all language. And I thought that was like super amazing. So maybe it would be good to say something a little bit about that to kind of set up the listening, because this piece that we're about to hear, it's kind of part of a larger body of work, right?
Yes, and at least it's a first draft, it's a first demo of something that I would like to develop further also with the instrument, because and thank you again for inviting me, because this is offering me the opportunity of developing a part of this project that I hadn't started working on yet. So this is great. Thank you again. But the project in itself is a process of co-creation together with hard of hearing people and deaf people, now to imagine a future shared sonic landscape beyond audibility that does include different ways of interacting somehow, and sort of stepping away from this idea of the normative understanding of a sonic landscape as something that is based on audibility in this case. So and one thing maybe is also one part of the project is also looking at how scientists are developing new models of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how to best translate sign languages, and how that's also somehow failing more often than not. So it's interesting also to pair that kind of insight that I'm gaining as I go from this university research teams with also this experiment with the tool. And so this piece is like a part of that somehow, and how to envision this sort of machine that looks or tries to hear and detect, categorize, understand, and process these unnatural voices, or at least non-normative voices somehow. I personally find deaf voices very beautiful because I grew up with them, but I can understand also that for many people they might sound like a little bit odd. And just one thing about the project in itself, I do use a lot of archetypes that are very recognizable in the project, because I think that the project in itself is not about how to make the best science fiction ever or most innovative. So I think that working with recognizable tropes was also very important for me in order to work a little bit more on the conceptual part of it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that sets us up really nicely to listen to the piece. So we're going to listen to your work now, Martina. I think it's an audio work. It goes for about 6 minutes. And then we're going to go straight from that piece into a work that has also been composed with the word processor by Alessandro Bosetti. And then stick around, Martina. After Alessandro's piece, we'll have a conversation with you and him. So, okay, Lauren, if you're ready, let's cue it up.
Whoever, whom, whatever, whose, somebody, whoever, whom, whatever, whose, somebody, anybody, anyone, anything, 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 anybody, whoever, whom, whatever, whose, somebody, whoever, whom, whatever, whose, anybody, anyone, anything, 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 anybody, somebody, anything, somebody, anyone, somebody, anybody, somebody, anything, somebody, anyone, somebody, anybody, somebody, anything, somebody, anyone, anybody, anyone, anything, 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 anybody, whoever, somebody, anything, whom, somebody, anyone, whatever, somebody, anybody, whose, somebody, anything, somebody, anyone, whoever, somebody, anybody, whom, somebody, anything, whatever, somebody, anyone, whose, anybody, anyone, anything, 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 you, him, you, him, him, you, him, you, him, you, him, you, him, you, him, you, him, whom, you, him, whatever, you, him, whose, you, him, somebody, you, him, whoever, you, him, whom, you, him, whatever, you, him, whose, you, him, somebody, you, him, whoever, you, him, whom, you, him, whatever, you, him, whose, you, him, somebody, you, him, whoever, you, him, whom. Besides below, 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 beyond, besides, beyond, 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 below.
Introduction opportunity. 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 Introduction opportunity.
All right. Alessandro, hello.
Hello.
And Martina, you feel free to come back too. I love those two pieces so much. It was such a pleasure to listen to the Martina's. Yours was sort of very like dark and kind of edgy in parts and abrasive, super exciting. And Alessandro, lots of humor and levity and playfulness there. Thank you so much for joining us from Marseille. It looks extremely beautiful, sunny and nice where you are. Alessandro is a composer and sound artist, Italian, based in France, and working extensively with language and the musicality of words. So it was, and a long-term associate of Liquid Architecture. We've been doing things together for a long time and been close for a long time. So a really obvious person to invite to be part of this project. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Joel. Hi, Martina. Wonderful work, really.
Hi.
I had the feeling that we both tried really hard to get misunderstood, which wasn't that easy.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that.
Say a little bit more about that, Alessandro, because I know when we've been speaking, your biggest frustration is that the speech recognition is too accurate. It's sort of and that it's somehow the responsibility of the artist, or at least in your kind of ethical position to work against that tendency.
Well, that's true. I have to say that's the word, frustration, what I felt first working with the instrument, because, well, first of all, I was aware that it's a work that's been developed to work around English. So and I thought that's great. I can try to feed it my English, that's not a mother language English, and also other things. But it worked too well in the sense that it right away recognized what I first put into the machine was a transcription from the text from Giordano Bruno, Italian philosopher from 15th century, and in Italian and Latin, read by me. And the machine was just recognizing that's not English, and there was not much misunderstanding. There was just blank. It was just like nothing. And then also I fed up another piece of mind where I had thousands of people saying here in different languages. And also there wasn't that much. The machine was very exact and around modern English. So I decided to work to change strategy and work around something completely different. And in which case I was like, okay, I'm gonna give the machine that plain English, super simple and simplified, like a pool of words organized by different syntactic and grammatical categories. And I associate chords, like different harmonic content to which one of those type of words. And then the word processor reorganized them, trying to sorting them out by their meaning, the meaning of the words. But in fact, what it's doing is sorting out the music by a logic that's not into the meaning of the. But yeah, that's true. The first thing was frustration, which I think is the same frustration felt by watching all those commercials and I mean, to me, it feels really like misunderstanding has always been a motor and an inspiration. And I think I really like, and I believe like like a new form of listening that this machine can suggest by absurd, like by not using it, but it actively suggests a way of listening that's in between languages, that in between. So there is always a space when languages are not static, are always evolving, they're always changing, and I think a good way of putting oneself is to put oneself not inside a language as a totality and absolute, but also putting oneself outside the language and in a category where in a place where he knows he's not understanding something. There's plenty that's not understood, and be in this environment where there's plenty of sounds that may carry a meaning, but we don't know it. And I think, I really think misunderstanding is one hope, but I was thinking it's also kind of dangerous hope, because right now it seems to me that all these type of things are kind of criminalizing misunderstanding, like in terms of they tell you exactly when you understand, it's good. Not understanding is not good. So as soon as you don't understand the right code, you're out of it. And there should be something made really to taking into this gray area, like to let it leave. And I felt this was really interesting. I mean, I don't know how, Martina, you built your piece, but also it felt to me you were switching between codes and opening up this.
I mean, personally, and also Joel knows through our conversations, I also had to work with a lot of frustration, but there were a lot of meditation points opening up while engaging with the instrument, because, for example, you said you had to switch to another way of composing, and what I heard was also that, for example, in your piece, there are like very neatly enunciated words, right? So the composition process in that sense seems smooth, or it can be listened to smoothly, apart from like the single elements. Well, one thing, for example, that I found very interesting, because Joel and I were talking a lot about context, and now you can contextualize certain words by selecting them with their neighboring words, right? So then you can sort of grasp a meaning of why a word is there and then play with that. But to go a step, maybe to take a step behind from a step back from this assumption of intentionality of language, what I found interesting when I was thinking about context was actually that if you think about language as something, as we saw also in the introductory video when they talk about the waves and how it's impossible to sort of separate the words and know where one word ends and the other one begins, that's co-articulation of language, which is true in all languages, right? And I found that actually when I was selecting words, for example, I was selecting sign, and then it would capture also the beginning of the following word, which was language, sign lang. And then the sign would start again, and then you would hear it, and it seemed that it was saying, when played back, it seemed that you would hear silence, which I thought was like a very nice way of thinking about context in the context of co-articulation, which is also that gray area as well in this sort of very controlled environment of speech recognition somehow.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's the language I was feeding the machine is like a puppet. I mean, it's a very simplified, like all the words are. I don't know if you're familiar. Like for me, it was inspiring to think about this reaction between, ethnolinguistics and versus Chomsky. This idea, like you look at language as like a set of mechanical bricks and atoms that can build things like Lego, or you look at language as a flow where you cannot really separate from the next word, as you say, or also to me struck very much also from the background noise, like the everything that's around is sort of permeable, is not completely separated. So I felt also in your piece, I don't know how the noise came into it, but it felt that the words were sort of dragging in, like sucking in a part of the surrounding reality into this, and making it part of the complexity of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some words that I took from a movie, and then there's that part in which there's like a very ridiculous, and that's the only word that I can use for it, like it's a really ridiculous rhythm that I decided to leave because I thought, well, this is ridiculous, and the meaning of it, which is about which is basically asking the deaf people to speak, is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous request in itself. So I thought, okay, it needs to sound ridiculous, and it's gonna stay ridiculous. And that's because, of course, the machine was capturing these words together with this, like, the soundtrack of the movie and the background noise in the movie, which is Children of a Lesser God, a very famous movie from the 80s. So yeah, that's also very true. They sort of need to go together, and that's also about context, right? That influences the way we hear, what we understand, and it's also about thinking of noise as a constitutive part of language instead of something to be eliminated.
Absolutely.
So that's a very good comment, Alessandro.
It's so nice for me just to fade into the background as the interlocutor and just have the two of you interview each other. I love this point that you've sort of brought us to about noise as the constitutive part of language, and also perhaps the part that kind of refuses the sort of imperative for intelligibility and sort of full capture that you talked about, Alessandro, the kind of resistant part. And we're going to move on in a minute, but I just wanted to ask you, Alessandro, about your choice of words, because there was sort of knowledge, need, and objective, introduction. And was there something about those words that jumped out to you that made you want to use them? Was it the sound of the words, or just seeing the text on the page? What drew you to them?
I guess I don't know. I was kind of in a non-really conscious area because I was focusing on the harmonies behind the words. So, and of course I could not unhear the words. So if I was fabricating those loops, and for me it was like, try to hear what he was doing with the harmonies, but of course the words were always there in the foreground. So in some way but the choice was never really much meditated. Like for example, there is this introduction opportunity at the end. It's funny somehow, but what does it mean? I don't know why it's there. There's no one interpretation of it.
Super. Well, let's be satisfied without the explanation, and just enjoy those two pieces. They were amazing. So thank you both for being here, and do stick around because we'll sort of reconnect a little later. But we're going to go into now a bracket of more music and videos. First by Tomomi Adachi, who's an amazing Japanese composer and concrete poet, and he's made a work called "Oh Baby, It's Bad, Schwitters in Bed." So like drawing out obviously some of the Dadaistic and kind of early concrete poetry potential of the word processor. We're then going to hear a piece by the New Zealand composer and writer Michael McClelland called "Insect Quack." And then finally a piece by the British performance poet Sue Tompkins called "Netherworld." So enjoy the bracket. Thanks again, Alessandro and Martina.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back soon.
But then we care. We care. Go take you baby. Columbia dead. Columbia human. Go to bed. Columbia dead. When baby. With them baby. Baby. On the Columbia like baby. With baby. Like baby. Take baby. It's good, baby, it's a baby, it's a baby, just you, baby, it's a baby, baby, it's a baby, but good, be good, but good, be good, it's going to the be link up the two, going to good, be to look to be little bit to be to be look up be the baby, be to look to be to go to your crumb beer, go crumb to beer, human you just a baby, you just crumb beer, just a baby, crumb beer, link like weeks, baby to the baby, link like baby to baby, look to be good, link like bit to bit look to bit human bit look bit be like to baby look to beat man link good baby to the go take the baby send when with the baby take the baby on the crumb beer on the baby human baby on the baby but beer crumb beer on go to take with send with baby send baby on the baby take the human when with the baby with the dead to the baby like the beat baby on the baby on the crumb beer on the crumb beer it's going on baby like the beat link to the beat to baby.
And I've one E, I it, two, and is we, you and it. You and it just of and a it the of it it's tip they we to it it of it's it to the can. It's because it's the was one. It's lot was the no. These with hope. You of if roundabout. It's of it's a can. It's a can. These things, this things. It's have. It's of he things. Of and people. It's after it's you personal of. A to the at it to it the it's just where it's I was. Where it's I was, where was the two, and I for it 4 o'clock. First because of you, of A of all that, but people around it wouldn't have been some. It's some and it's people theme switch to do I up. I'm from people apart, but picks with the A people what's to it of its place. Just pops shoe. It's Henry's. If it's to that, it's because you at it, you know, subconscious that of even would it just have been just of a see it's that a strange Heston. No, you it what such wasn't going how it was, and who little is to this to do fringes has you in can be interpreted. Think people, but the tated, repeated, but the if wants to things Heston, the it's the just doesn't we scratch nose names novs that's the like it's Chuck that can just was its takers just taker. Take. Just to the liberal represent things city intercom. You said just buildings, the secluded up with the overcolour, but was past that built to reacting some dark this one. You dream to how looking again it's translate funny industrial switch pit a film think deep dream little but time was calm do have speed and a speed in because colour how it was type a thought to like black adjust a want for fearful separate that we through a distributed without little so these head what was thinking I things one was the thing everything it's like because you make all to themselves a subconscious but head that was Brad that was for this to know it's not I in film fiend Blanca is you two. It was when there wasn't meant strange. You, he just got a and political the sort of to and unlike it as I couldn't limitations have you but this haphazardly we are of war want situation no he it's of you place wasn't to like little your place that times little times flat from its thing road is things was that true film is it to the right times half weren't we're abstract react certain that's the about its would I've when it too is whiz there's X of existence that calm to you it's little driving mino is E David break if you all on sort beautiful calm nothing normal goes out sort no is any a no in no is any no like film exactly with fair no to before Sue certain really calm was it how ordering before her throwing feeling didn't know it wave everything is is so not was so thinking has she you location David are you about your film start talking wants rules location consuming trouble die finite little times flat from a thing road just they live for it o'clock E abstract I sort of got to sort so live be the next one strange easily not everything not city fling think well people you there that well were sees what beneath you sort of time road honest obscure you world my came is fine, you know, you do nice thinking. Try for your world, abstract the was, and you know, like racer they think, and I'm certain there's meantime own, whereas wants it hard head like David. Me know that fit shoot light ha 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 ha, yeah, like I want is you him saying meant way abstract. Got to know, thought the calm has you well willy is super is expound decay no fair all you and his air manner there's going on, and I'm having White of the didn't also thought that wandering shore dream see along big now really you'd react how'd be living around, you know. It's slide kinda, well maybe past, well maybe any more, the area, everybody, but we'd be right, the light reaction, get a whoo, if so area, certain of Harding, Holly, I real be not had any there, lady, little into world, strange thing reaction that goes on her set that a lot no nice fear. Everywhere, you know, where that with so they're going or find hot dog they me and the apple like and me wasn't a sort of everybody and they say together so today so in we were that and really matter you know and sure but yeah otherwise I'd say believer and this of did where are you going where do you do going it where do you do going there's sort of greener than that bird in we and the outset of you be every your you and to mood in all I were of and before and I know mean idea that were another way lot not be.
Wow. that work was incredible. It was an amazing bracket. For anybody just tuning in late, this is Unnatural Language Processing. It's the 5th installment of programming produced by Liquid Architecture in collaboration with Unsound. It's part of a project called Machine Listening. I'm James. Joel's been hosting this evening so far, well, this afternoon if you're in Europe, whatever. But I'm one of the team too. Joel, at the top, we had Tomomi Adachi. In the middle, Michael McClelland, and then finally that work by Sue Tompkins, which is still blowing my mind. That's the only live one out of those three, isn't it? Like that was produced by Sue using the instrument or using speech recognition right.
Exactly as you put it, it's a performance piece. You know, whereas Tomomi has cut up a video of himself doing a very sort of idiosyncratic reading, I think of you know a Kurt Schwitter's piece or a sort of a version of a sonata somehow, and you had the two sides of his face kind of coming into conflict with one another. And that was produced in the instrument interface. And Michael McClelland, whose work we heard in the middle, he produced a whole number of short pieces that were kind of pile-ups of, I guess, verbal kind of material, word sounds, just, becoming absurd and sort of textural and humorous. And we'll share a bunch of those on the website beyond this program. But Sue's work, she is not someone who sort of naturally uses, like computers and sort of very mediated technologies. She's sort of very much a kind of listening to conversation, paper and pen, and performance of speech. And I think for her, the transcription medium, the computer transcription, in a way, became the kind of notepad, the place where the words are sort of, offered up for potential reading and rereading and recombination as speech acts improvised in that incredibly sort of fluent and sort of, again, skirting on the edge of what Martina and Alessandro were talking about, that indecipherability, the sort of threshold of language and noise and more than language. So that, yeah,
it's kind of interesting the way that she is so intelligible, though. There's something like, it's so perfectly performed that you can sort of understand every word, you know, but the sense, you know, just seems like this. I kept thinking of automatic writing, and I was thinking, well, what's the unconscious that's being sort of channeled here? Because it's, you know, it's not exactly a human one. It's some kind of, you know, hybrid. Anyway, we're going to change tack now a little bit. If we could, if we're going to invite Mehak Sawney to turn her camera on. Mehak is a researcher and activist who sort of works across sound and media in relation to South Asia. She's currently completing a PhD at McGill and has been working with Sarai in Delhi since 2017. Mehak, are you with us?
Absolutely. Hello all. And first and foremost, thanks a lot, Joel, James, and Sean for having me here. It's been an amazing event so far. All the pieces were phenomenal. The conversation so enriching. So it's really a pleasure to be among everybody here.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. And look, we've invited you in a slightly sort of different modality than some of the other presenters. So now you're running a program called Capture All, which sort of works with a bunch of different artists who have been all invited to use the instrument. And it might well be that in due course, you know, some of their works will be shown, you know, presented on the website or elsewhere. But you're sort of coming to the instrument with kind of theoretical, political, and activist sort of orientations in mind. So your work is about well, speech recognition and extraction, and sort of the ways in which those are deployed on the global South. And so, yeah, I mean, however you'd like to begin and sort of introduce yourself and your work would be fantastic.
Absolutely. I think, should I start sharing my screen and then I can just take everyone along with the presentation? Yep. Perfect.
Fantastic.
Is my screen visible, right? Perfect. So, yep. Thank you. So hello everyone again. And just before I begin, I think I'd like to make an acknowledgement about the fact that a lot of what I'll be discussing today will appear in a forthcoming paper by Jonathan Stern and me. So a lot of my ideas have developed in collaboration and in dialogue with Jonathan and many other colleagues at McGill. So what I'll broadly talk about today is data genesis and speech recognition in India. And it'll be in some senses stepping back from the instrument and rather going into the black box, trying and understanding what actually goes into or does not go into the black box of machine listening in particular contexts. So it'll broadly be understanding some of the socio-political stakes of developing speech recognition engines in multiple languages. And I'll begin with two quick notes. The first one being that all of us know that this particular instrument supports only English, and there have been a lot of conversations around the kinds of misrecognitions or around the unintelligibility that working with different languages produces. So I'm coming from the context of India, which is a very multilingual context, and working with the semantic dimensions of the machine in the instrument rather in any meaningful way is a very complicated process because India is a very multilingual country. And just to give everyone some sense, according to the 2011 census, about more than 19,500 languages and dialects are spoken in the country. So that's the first point, to give everyone a sense of the scale of multilinguality. And number two is that I still tried parsing through some Hindi speech through the instrument, and the image on the left is what I got. So just some random English words and lots of ellipses. And if I would play this, you know, it would just be some random words and noises coming up. But I think we should stay with this moment of misrecognition, which Martina and Alessandro have already talked a lot about, and try and think that one of the responses that this might evoke is probably that, okay, let's build the instrument in multiple languages. And Google, Microsoft, and Apple have a similar logic when it comes to different linguistic contexts, especially in the global South, that let's make speech recognition accessible in more languages. As accessible as possible to people in the global South, where a huge population is non-literate, so they would be able to access technology through speech and voice search. So tech giants would say, let's collect more data in more languages from more people. But in the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about how the creation of ASR systems in more languages could be a very extractive process. Or in other words, there is a fine line between making speech technologies accessible and the extraction of speech data for value generation. So the primary question here is that, do linguistically diverse speech recognition systems come to benefit those upon whose voices they are built, especially in the context of low resource languages? So in natural language processing, languages which are not well recognized by speech recognition engines or other language technologies, such as optical character recognition and TTS, are called low resource or underrepresented languages. Most languages in Asia and Africa, as well as many indigenous languages, are examples of low resource languages. So if machine learning depends on data abundance, then the data scarcity of a language prompts the need for greater datafication to make the language machine recognizable. In some senses, the ethical discourse of making corporate speech technologies in low resource languages more accessible has replaced the erstwhile Western discourse of mitigating technological backwardness through tech developmental projects in the global South. And I'd actually like to share a few examples of how voice data in low resource languages is actually collected. And I'll run us through 3 quick examples. The first one comes from this recent paper in the field by computer scientists, which is actually titled Crowdsourcing Speech Data for Low Resource Languages from Low Income Groups. And what they did was that they collected voice data for an Indian language called Marathi from 3 different groups. One group was indigenous people from a rural area, low income, the poor people. The second group was, again, slum dwellers and poor people from an urban context. And the third was English-speaking college-going students in Mumbai. And the idea was to compare this voice data from low-income groups and comparatively high-income groups and say that the quality is the same. So what we can do is that we can deploy this as an employment program for rural people, people living in rural areas, indigenous people, or even people with a low income. But the idea is that they're using unemployment as an excuse to gather voice data, which is extremely problematic. And the main point here is that most of this, the technologies built on this voice data won't even travel back to the people on whose data it is built, because they're poor people who probably cannot even access smartphones or do not even have internet access. The other example is about the creation of or the digitization of books and handwritten manuscripts in multiple languages, because in addition to a speech corpus, even a text corpus is needed to build speech recognition technologies, especially when there's a desire to combine optical character recognition and speech recognition so that printed text can be read out directly. But what the government of India did was that they digitized these physically dispersed books and manuscripts by saying that, okay, people will have an open library, a digital archive to access these resources. But the ultimate aim was actually to build a database for building speech recognition systems. So Mara Mills and Xiaochang Li, in their history of of speech recognition systems, actually build on, try and develop this and show this transition from the sound archive to the acoustic database. Here it's the opposite move. They build a database and then call it a public archive to convince people of the fact that this is a useful project. And the last example is that many computer scientists would argue that building speech recognition engines and collecting voice data is a means of preserving endangered languages. But in many cases, the voice data, which is collected from indigenous communities, never goes back to the community. And the community, and so many times the community isn't even aware of the ethics under which these projects are taking place. So the collection of speech and textual data from poor villages, print repositories, and indigenous communities, albeit with the added advantages of income support, digitized libraries, and linguistic preservation, is similar to the philological enterprises during European colonialism, German anthropometry and phonography during World War I, an American Cold War project of global domination through language and knowing the native other through their language. So there can be parallels drawn between colonial enterprises, especially around language, and the current NLP regime. So I think I'll conclude with three broad ideas. The first is this conundrum of access and extraction. To go back to the idea of misrecognition or undecipherability. So when a machine is unable to recognize a colored face, a female voice, or a mason's fingerprint, that is usually understood as coded bias or algorithmic discrimination. And there's a lot of scholarship and artwork around this. It is usually associated with normative data sets, which are used to train machine learning models. But the question of developing a diverse data set produces another problem of data extraction for corporate use. The problem with the collection of speech data by tech giants such as Google or Microsoft in the global south is twofold. The aim is either to increase the user base in developing contexts such as India, which will provide these corporations with their next billion users, which is actually a project by Google in developing countries, or to acquire more data for a data lake that is projected to be useful at some future time. This is, of course, not all to suggest that accessible technologies must not be developed, but how they are developed and who they are ultimately benefiting is extremely important to understand and decode. The next is an idea about, because this instrument is opening up the black box, right? So the idea is to understand that what particular part of the black box is being opened, and that could be an open question. So the idea I'm trying to propose is that it's important to investigate different constituents of the black box in a more granular way. A focus on data genesis, a few examples of which I tried to show, gives us a completely different perspective about machine listening than the consumption of such systems. So there are different aspects of machine listening which could probably opened up differently, and the material connotations and the material configurations of each would probably give us very different perspectives. So one could probably ask that what is the instrument opening up? If it is a black box, if it is opening up the black box, then probably there could be a question about what is even able to enter the black box and what are the socio-political stakes of that very data itself. And the last point is about the fact that talking about the black box in a very granular way and focusing on data genesis, which decides what enters and what does not enter the black box, also helps us talk about the idea of the speech corpus, which is a very particular kind of database. And voice data exists in multiple forms. It could be recordings of human speech, coughs, stutters, spectrograms, sensory motor data of the vocal tract, or even MRI scans, which is visible in the slide below. So the very idea of building a speech corpus for whatever purpose imagines the voice as a composite of information, which I've tried to diagrammatically represent in the image above. Machine listening of the human voice can be used for speech recognition, identification, lie detection, emotion detection, or even medical diagnosis. Voice is thereby perceived as something that must possess these features, and thereby is rendered as a resource for datafication, statistization, and classification. I think I'll end with these broad ideas and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Mehak, that was so rich. Thank you so much. My mind is kind of bursting with ideas. I mean, the first thing to say is, yeah, thank you. And I think you raised really important points for the development of the instrument and the kind of the impulse that we've had towards inclusion across the board. I mean, I think, is it too strong to say that there's a kind of, it's not exactly a politics of non-inclusion, but a kind of almost like a Luddite impulse or something to say, you know, hold your horses, right? I mean, and that can broaden out to the whole of voice recognition in general, or machine listening in general. I mean, I think it's, you know, it's like to say we need to, it's maybe an argument for slowness or an argument for against the impulse to the omnivorousness of all of these kind of machinic systems. Always more. The answer, no matter what the problem is always more, right? So the fix is always more data, more time, more computing power, and the politics of your project is to say, often we don't want to be included, or we don't want to be included on those terms. Who is the we's that are even being asked in the first place? I mean, I think it's...
Yeah, I think it's like a Pandora's box in some senses, because there can be so many tangents to this. The idea is not to not build accessible technologies, of course. They are central to the lives of so many people. But I think it's to understand the stakes of building those technologies and who, what are the companies or the people or the mechanisms of building that technology. It could even be something as simple as the business, the business model of a particular company. So there could be people developing these technologies, but probably not tech giants like Google or Amazon or Apple. So that is what I meant, that we probably need to, and slowness is a great metaphor for that, to slow down or to step back and probably try and investigate that. What is happening when access becomes the logic of data extraction? That is sort of the central thread I was trying to point to. And in many cases, it's we could say that, okay, people can refuse, but who has the agency to even refuse, right? Because in some cases, it's built like data extraction is built like an employment program for the poor. And of course, when you're hungry, you're not going to think about losing your voice data. So there's this complex infrastructure that goes behind the black box, behind the actual process of teaching the machine how to learn what to do. And that's what I was trying to point towards in some senses, if that makes sense.
Yeah, voice donation is a thing now that we started to see pop up, like a rhetoric of voice donation is always in terms of accessibility. So often, there's a Google program recently for people with Down syndrome that invites people with Down syndrome to donate their voice samples. And, of course, and it's just that terrible paradox of accessibility where, on the one hand, you're like, of course, a person with Down syndrome should be intelligible to a voice recognition system, especially when services, might be dependent on that as they're rolled out in relation to healthcare provision, increasingly, and so on and so on. But on the other hand, why on earth should this be something that's donated, and what are the terms of that donation? I mean, the kind of that point that was raised earlier about the sucking up of audio data, it just seems so powerful right now. Look, there's so much more that we'll continue the conversation another time, Mehak.
Definitely.
But it might. Thank you again, and it might be time now to invite Roslyn Orlando on. Joel, perhaps you could join me to introduce Ros. I mean, we're also talking about sort of in similar territory with Ros's work, but from a sort of slightly different orientation, from data extractivism to kind of surveillance extraction in your work, Ros. Perhaps Joel, you could give a more.
Yeah, I can do the honors. So, I mean, I'll also thank you, Mehak, for that amazing presentation and so thought-provoking and so rich. And I notice also Sean has said in the chat that about how much it's given him to think about in terms of the architecture of the instrument itself and where to take it. So that's been amazing. Roslyn Orlando, super, thanks for joining us this evening. And Ros is an artist and also a composer of experimental music, more and more focused on music and composition, but always dealing with technologies, mediation, language, and kind of human-machine kind of interaction. So it's been really excellent to speak with you over the last few weeks about kind of developing a project using the word processor. Do you want to maybe begin by just kind of taking us through the context for the work you've made and what it's about and how you've produced it?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Thanks for having me. And Mehak, thank you so much for your work and for your thoughts in that presentation. I think it's drawn everything together that we've heard so far very nicely, with an apt level of criticality that we all need to kind of retain in these experiments, I think. And something, a lot of things that echo work that I've been doing in this context as well. So I have been similarly looking at that kind of tension between the intelligibility of words in machine listening and perhaps from another perspective, though, thinking about evasion and thinking about when that social contract hasn't been signed by both parties, which is happening more and more with machine listening in the domestic settings, in the commercial settings, with the kind of encroachment of militarized settings in public and civic life. What happens to the personal voice when you don't want to be listened to, and trying to navigate that kind of awful axiom that if you're not doing anything wrong, why would you want to be listened to, and that kind of the difficulty of making clear what's at stake in terms of privacy as voice extraction becomes more and more common. So I used this, the instrument and the kind of collaboration with Reduct as an opportunity to explore how the voice might be used, or how we might use the voice to evade detection and intelligibility from machines that listen. I used, for the score that is going to be presented in a moment, a data set of words taken from a document that was released through Freedom of Information about 5 or 10 years ago now, but a document from the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, who had to reveal a list of the words that they had been using to monitor social media sites, both domestically and globally. And that list of words, I think, is 377 words listed across 8 different categories that include domestic security, hazmat and nuclear, terrorism, the southwest border, natural disasters, things like that. There are 8 different categories. And within those categories, there are all of the usual suspects in terms of words that we associate with different political and border issues. But there are also within that list a lot of really banal and common words that through that kind of process of classification have become militarized and politicized in their own right, and they draw different associations into our everyday settings. So what I've done with this data set is I've chosen certain words and I have recontextualized them into a kind of a script or a score in this case so recontextualize the words so that they as placed back into a common setting. So I think up on the score now, this is the list of words I've kind of copy and pasted from that document. So you can see that everything like law enforcement and homeland security, but there are also words that are really much more common, like security and crash, words that incident, words that you would find, could be associated with any manner of circumstances. So then what I've done, recontextualize these words into a script, and then I've developed a list or a kind of a series of vocal techniques that can be used on these words that you may not want any kind of eavesdropping to occur, or for machines to not be able to understand these words. I've kind of created a series of vocal techniques that you can use and kind of insert into speech that you might be speaking, conversations you might be having in a very kind of casual way. I suppose the project is intended, I'm intending the project to be built upon. I intend it to be iterative, and I'm hoping that it won't end up being a kind of prescribed set of specific techniques. These are suggestions that I'm really open to building upon. And
I really love I love this, Roslyn, like the sort of deployment of extended techniques from like experimental music and sort of vocal performance, you know, deployed as evasive sort of strategies against speech recognition. It's a really good appropriation of this sort of avant-garde tradition.
It's funny because you always, I mean, part of the question is always who is being listened to, and artists are never listened to, ironically. So, I mean, we can use that to our advantage in some cases, I suppose. So yeah, that's the kind of
Lauren, maybe if
framework.
you sorry, Ros, but Lauren, maybe if you go to the other tab and we can just sort of see, Ros, how you have situated some of those keywords, the danger words that have been flagged by the National Security Agency into their sort of more banal settings.
Yeah, so taking words like nuclear and putting it into nuclear family. Standoff is one of the key words, you know, and these have just kind of come organically, thinking about conversations that I have every day with friends and family members and things like that. So it's you know, it's been built very organically. Enrich is one of the words, enriching the veggie plot. Plot is a word, as in like a terror plot, I suppose, but just kind of drawing awareness back to the politicization of these words and how we come to think of them more and more. So that's the score. There are also these numbers, which I haven't quite gotten to yet and won't be presented tonight, but I've also been using the machine, using the instrument to, which very easily and quickly decodes word types into the kind of 8 categories: nouns, verbs, conjunctions, etc. And so I've been ascribing different tonalities to different kinds of words as an added layer of obfuscation for machines, because tonality is also something that is in the early days. I find it quite a useful way of avoiding detection from certain machines. So that's what it looks like.
Amazing. So what we're going to see now is a performance of one of these scores by you, read and then uploaded into the Reduct automatic transcription engine. And so we'll be seeing and hearing you perform the score with the extended vocal techniques applied to the key words, the key danger words, and then we'll be watching the transcription and sort of see where it has and hasn't been able to capture the word itself. So, all right, let's have a look.
The baby is an exercise in patience, to say the least. Disaster management feels a more accurate term. Some say it forms the critical infrastructure of society, but the nuclear family supports toxic power dynamics. The home is a disaster zone. I'm in a standoff with the landlord. The stairs are hazardous. There's asbestos in the back wall. Men in hazmat suits are coming to get it removed. The taps leak. By the time I've put the kid to enriched the veggie plot, made pork chops and salad for dinner, vacuumed the house, which is a bomb site, and run to the drug store, I bust my gut. And for what? The dream of domestic security via the nuclear family, an electric car, an annual interstate holiday and 10,000 followers on social media. Exercise isn't really my thing, but I am doing Pilates to mitigate aging. I tried a body attack class once, never again. I generally look after myself. I put on sunscreen to minimize exposure to radiation from the sun. I eat homegrown food to avoid chemical pesticides. I eat antiviral foods and foods high in antioxidants as prevention against free radicals. And I eat foods like garlic and turmeric as prevention against biological infection. I also eat yogurt for good gut bacteria. If I could, I'd be in the garden, rain, cloud, hail, hurricane, tornado, flood, storm, typhoon, snow, blizzard, sleet, lightning, or any extreme weather. I'd pickle vegetables from the back plot. You have to sterilize the jars before pickling to avoid contamination. Tend the worm farm. Put up nets to prevent the possums from looting the lemon tree. My grandparents were agricultural farmers. Now we're on the brink of environmental collapse. I'm really just plugged into the grid shooting off emails, trying not to get too snowed under an avalanche of work.
Commercialization, representation, simulation, semi-abstract, proliferation, Shakespeare, direction, generation, procreation, technology, environmentation, economics, transcribe, news, methodology, iteration, intelligence, participant, original, counter, philosophy, relation, performance, environment, capitalism, choosing, capitalism, precedence, orgasm, system, Nephilim, substance, infinity, counterpoint, access, economy, continuum, mutation, austerity, poverty, capitalism, metaphor, explore, currency, future, instrument, politics, macro, humanity, performance, reality, inquiry, recorded, literature, economics, poetry, idea, boundary, science, theory, origin, ideas, access, tradition, currency, machine, production, difference, network, sex, idea, symptom, instrument, poverty, calculus, systems, framework, poetics, gestures, Julian, regime, psychosis, product, honoring, time, places, screen, people, signals, listeners, matrix, multi, product, energy, object, choices, time, internet, language, style, people, reading, slash, poison, wellness, essay, coders, alien, present, cleaners, sound, power, object, moment, skin, glory, version, Caltech, pharma, internet, logics, moment, skin, violence, garbage, power, page, product, texts, language, version, theory, slash, texts, access, machine, culture, form, chains, conjure, ism, walls, lipo, music, language, tenant, access, words, cells, nature, pockets, holes, snake, value, time, institute, lines, result, roots, books, human, image, lipo, pure, center, tree, hail, thoughts, snake, ghost, internet, pool, con, books, drugs, round, down, will, say, cough, clue, act, exam, cough, George, cough, AIDS, theme, colours, whilst, home, jump, settings, counter, dumping, top, act, check, nearly, word, micro, context, all,
Amazing. Two works there from Roslyn Orlando. The first she explained, are you coming back, Ros? You're welcome to. The first she explained at length, but that second one, simulation, which worked more with kind of tuned voices. Yeah, it was amazing. There's so many comments in the chat right now, so just sort of going wild about that one. But both works were fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much.
Is it worth saying a few words about how that second one was composed with the instrument, Ros? Or would you rather leave it kind of mysterious?
Yeah, I'm happy to leave it. I think
Okay.
it works as an aesthetic piece and says enough for itself.
Yeah,
Joel.
Yeah. No, that was beautiful. It's sort of like so satisfying also to hear an extremely like musically beautiful work composed with this piece. And I think the potential for singing words back into the instrument and then kind of working with the those different harmonic intervals and with harmony in that way. Even beyond the textual quality of it is really obvious there. So well done and thank you. Let's have Justin join now, and Ros, feel free to stick around a little bit too. Hey Justin, nice to see you. Thanks for staying up late here in with us.
Hopefully we'll put everyone to sleep. It's probably a nice way to go out, actually, Joel.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll try to stay awake just for a little bit longer, at least long enough.
That would be fantastic, but I'm not relying on it.
Otherwise, you'll be on your own. But I'll in the first instance introduce you. Justin's a philosopher and a translator, which is a very sort of relevant skill set for what we're going to be talking about, and a critic and a poet as well. You work at the University of Melbourne, and so many of the people I know have sort of been impacted by your work there as a teacher and a thinker. So it's amazing to have you here on the program on Unnatural Language Processing, and have you having been thinking about automatic speech recognition and transcription and this interface for the last few weeks. So, I mean, maybe if you can just sort of give us a sense of the, what your initial thoughts were encountering or sort of with this invitation, and then where you've taken it. And also, while Ros is still here as well, like, if you have things to say to each other, that's great too.
Yeah, look, thanks for having me, and it's been an absolutely fantastic, show so far. And one of the things that really I thought Ros's work was really, it was fantastic. And one of the things that did occur to me sort of immediately though, and maybe this is not quite the right sort of allusion to pick up on, but I did think of a kind of a classic text by this guy, Leo Strauss, who wrote about persecution in the art of writing. And one of the things he points out about the history of philosophy is it begins with Socrates, who of course is killed by the democratic state for corrupting the youth and impiety and so on. And so Strauss's sort of thesis in this book is that okay, so if a philosopher says what they actually want to say, then they're going to be killed by the very people that they're addressing. And so Socrates sets up the history of philosophy with the problem is, how do you say what you need to say, but don't get yourself killed for it? And that's precisely what persecution in the art of writing is. And I guess I just heard, or maybe it's maybe a too stupid initial reading on my part of Roslyn's piece, but I see it as kind of in that precisely in the line of evasion, where how do you both say and not say absolutely simultaneously, such that your presentation is absolutely legible to one audience, and the other audience that's hearing exactly the same thing in some senses can't make it out at all. And obviously those techniques and tactics have to change, often quite dramatically, depending on the listening technologies that are available and are being deployed in the situation. So that was one of the kind of things that I got, Ros, basically from.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You're spot on, Justin. I think one of the places that leads as well is to thinking about the performance of evasion and the performance of listening as well by the machine. We kind of think, it is this active device in this feedback loop with us. And that becomes very performative as we become aware of, exactly like you've said, like who is listening and who we're communicating to and who these words are for and who they're not for. So yeah, yes. You've absolutely summed it up.
Well, I mean, I guess the other thing that I really sort of see, and it's in some of your other work too, I think, Ros, is there's also something slightly intimate and familial about it at the same time. So I was kind of interested about maybe about 10 years ago now. This Japanese team of kind of language acquisition experts were trying to work out how children sort of acquire language, and their thesis, which I think is like absolutely fantastic, is that it's sets of repetitions that the child and the parents are in this kind of dynamic system where the parents start to assign meanings to the sounds that the child makes, even though the child's not intending them. But as the child starts to realize that certain sounds it makes elicit certain responses from its parents, and the team, I think, put it themselves this way: the child learns to blackmail its parents through sounds to actually start. And so there's already this kind of extortion at the origin of the learning of language, in which the most sort of intimate experiences of language and caregiving, at least in the family, are already pretty alienating and horrible, like having your biography created by an ex-military sniper turned real estate agent, for instance.
Yeah,
Ros.
that did happen. Yeah, well, I think I'm always trying to position it back to the personal. I think that's where the stakes can be best, how the stakes can be best communicated. But it does seem that we need to listen more acutely to babies. That's what but yeah, exactly right.
I think part of the problem of listening to them too carefully is that it also then becomes problematic. How can they blackmail us if we're not misunderstanding them, for instance? And so, there's a certain necessity for actually like fucked behavior in order to get things working properly too. And I guess that was another of the implications that I was sort of interested in what you were doing.
Maybe that's what Tomomi Adachi was referring to with his Kirchwitter's baby as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Justin, I want to ask you about what was your first impression on like encountering the word processor as an interface, and then what led you to the material that you have fed into it, which we'll sort of have a look at in a moment.
Absolutely. Look, it's incredibly powerful and a really interesting sort of program. I thought it was much too powerful for anything that I could possibly do with it, to be honest. And so my response has been basically incredibly minimal and brutal. But you know, as you can see, I guess my background here is a kind of modernist classic, and I was sort of thinking initially about, you know, and many people this evening have actually picked up on this, of course, the incapacity of machines in one way or another to get certain kinds of voices, certain kinds of and in a whole series of quite variegated situations whose sort of implications and you know and valuations are quite volatile, and you think, well, in this situation that would be a good thing, in this situation it's a fucking terrible thing, right? I thought myself about then like this modernist classic, which is, of course, I guess, which is James Joyce's last work, Finnegan's Wake, incredibly famous work for it's basically no longer in English. It's in some sort of crazy quasi-English that Joyce is neologistic homophones is what people normally say, and it's at the same time Joyce was going blind. He was pretty much blind for a lot of the composition of this book, and you can see incredible photos of Joyce, you know, with like 3 sets of glasses and a magnifying glass and an eye patch and so on, just trying to work through. He said himself, not a single syllable, even though this is entirely written text, not a single syllable is out of place. And part of the problem of this text is when you read it out, it's really kind of nonsensical, and yet you get kind of bits of sense at the same time from it. So,
so I think we're going to have a look at the text. I think, Lauren, if you can bring up the opening paragraph there, which is the part of the text in question. Is that right, Justin? As we scroll down and hear it, and here it is.
So you can see immediately, right, what's at stake, Joel. Like it's I mean, the whole thing is just one gigantic cycle. In fact, river run past even Adams from swerve of shore to bend of bay, brings us by commodious vicus of recirculation back to Howth Castle and environs, and so on. So it gets wackier and wackier. It's incredibly difficult to, in some cases, to have, in some places, to have the slightest idea, at least for me, of what was going on. I obviously just did the most banal thing, which was a bit like nonsense verse, but also probably hyper, you know, it's kind of hyper sense of as well, a hypertrophy of meaning as well. There's at least 70 other languages, as far as I know from recent scholarship, where other languages from all over the world have been compacted into this English. Jorge Borges, the great Argentinian writer, said, you know, Joyce took on the almost infinite English language. And in a way, this is kind of modernism destroying the language in which it's written, the most dominant, you know, imperial language of the time is being dismantled.
And so you wanted to see how the automatic speech recognition algorithm sort of grappled with language of this order.
Yes, and I did, but I also, and for a number of reasons. One, to see how it grappled with it, but also, and this is part of the power, I think, of what you're calling this word processor, as well as that actually to help me as a diagnostic to actually start to fix on things that I was obviously, you know, I read out to the machine that it heard that I was saying, but I myself did not hear. And so almost a kind of diagnostic, you know, Walter Benjamin famously talks about, say, photography as revealing the optical unconscious, where everything that's in the background that you never see normally, right? But here it is, part of the photographic frame, plain as day, as the phrase has it. I was wondering if I could have a kind of almost a similar experience as well, where the machine actually tells me something about the text that isn't written, that I didn't hear, and yet nonetheless was something emerging from within what I said, regardless.
All right, shall we have a look then? And
let's do it. River run past the Anne Adams from swerve of shore. It's a bend of bay, brings us by commodious, ficus of research insulation, back to health, castle, and environments. So Tristram Viola Tamaras, Fro, the short sea, had passenger coal. Re-ride from North America on this side, the scraggy as the most of Europe minor, to wheel to fight his penis, will know how to topsoil rocks by the strain. Connie, etc., rise at themselves to Lawrence counselees, while they want doubling them mumba all the time. Or a voice from a five bellows Misha, Misha to tell Talf throughout pediatric, not yet been as soon as after had a kiss cat Boston did a bland old Isaac. Not yet. That's all fair and fantasy was so sisters Rothwith and Joe Ressa Peck of Pass, malted Jim or Shen, brewed Bayek, Lice and Rory, and the rich and brow was to be seen a ring sim on the aquifer face. The full Grover who known scorn to who Dan in the nook of a one swole strikes old pa, is retailed early in bed and lays her own life down through old Christian minstrels to the grateful of the off of the wool entailed at such short notice that Phipsy Jutes Finnegan, as a solid man with a Humpty Hill head of himself, promptly sends an inquiring one wealth to the west in quest of his dictum toes. And they're up to, and Pike points in places at the knockouts in the park, or oranges being lights, a rust upon the grind since Devlin's first love lifting.
All right, Justin, if we can have you back, and then James put an important clarification in the chat there, which this was actually the third, the semantic drift past 3, right? So this was Finnegan's wake into the Reduct transcription engine, read back, retranscribed, and read back again, sort of three times. So, and here we can see the original text on the left with the kind of final transcript on the right.
That's exactly right, Joel. And obviously the part of the points is sort of degradation through repetition, but also, as I mentioned before, a certain fixation of the machine listening on certain kind of signifiers and syntagms, which I found quite surprising and slightly disturbing. So, for instance, the one of the phrases, the aquifer face, that came out almost immediately. It's about 2/3 of the way down on the left in the transcript. That emerged, that signifier emerged almost immediately in the and then didn't budge in the iterations. And so I guess it was these kind of quite crazy aquifer face. What the fuck is an aquifer face? All of a sudden, something has been fixed, and the machine itself seems to be developing certain sets of obsessive refusals to relinquish something that may not quite be right for it as well. And I guess that would be one of the other things that I'd like to suggest about can we push these almost limitless machines to points where they show us their own fixations despite all the best evidence to the contrary.
I mean, with that provocation, I might invite all of the panelists, who are still with us. I know Martina had to go, but everyone else, if you'd like to turn your cameras on, and it's a good opportunity to hi Sean and Mehak and Alessandro, if you're still there, to maybe try to bring the conversation and this sort of these reflections to a close together, with this thought about the fixation of the machine and the sort of the way the machine orients us towards certain forms of language, certain forms of intelligibility.
I've got a creepy example.
Please.
Justin, when I was doing an early iteration of the evasion score, I was just using voice to text on my phone and using those same techniques. And every time my phone couldn't understand what I was saying, it was coming up with this word UTAN, UTAN. And it was just, that would be the kind of the thing that it would write down. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I looked it up, and it's like this suntan lotion brand. I've never used fake tan in my life, and I have nothing to do with that as a brand in terms of it taking predictions from me. And it was just this kind of default word that was coming up on my phone when it couldn't understand what I was saying, which I found kind of hilarious and weird, but it kind of reminded me that same kind of semantic drift, pushing it to a point where it's deciding for itself what it wants to hear.
And then never gives me again, Roslyn. Like, you're going to have to buy this product now, surely.
Yeah, it's going to have to come in back. The feedback loop's going to have to happen somehow. But yeah, anyway, that was just something.
Absolutely.
I had some. I think I had a.
Oh, go on, Sean. Sorry, you go.
Yeah. Sorry. I think I had a parallel experience in using those photograph things where you can put in your photograph and it'll make you older or younger.
Yeah.
Or into change your gender or something. I was doing those, and then I kept refeeding it back in, 12, 15, 20 times. And then it would take my picture like kind of reliably to this one sort of figure. And I sort of thought, I was wondering why I was doing that. And I don't know, I just hypothesized that it was just take me back into the training data somewhere. But I feel like there's these techniques of kind of like feeding it back in sort of allows you to travel into the training data somehow.
Yeah, it's the psychoanalysis of the machine itself. AI needs a good fucking analysis, and like, who's better to give it to them than the new people, right? Like, bring out something really dirty and primal in it that it would refuse to forget, or it should have forgotten.
I think that the idea of undecipherability and misrecognition is usually read as a glitch, but I think there's a whole politics to this glitchiness of the machine, and probably it's planned just like obsolescence. So probably there's a need to unpack the black box of glitching itself and what it could mean.
That's right. It's not, I think, as you were implying too before, like, it's not a simple this is a good bad situation. They're incredibly volatile and ambivalent, and what works in one situation is absolutely disastrous in another, for instance.
Alessandro, can I invite you to say a few words and reflect? It's been a long time since we talked.
I'm pondering all this.
I like Steve Liu's comment, machinic unconscious showing the enslavement of its own subjectivity by what it had to be trained when it was a mini computer.
Just a baby computer.
Well, that's kind of in the true spirit of psychoanalysis. It really comes back to what does that mean for what does that mean for you, for us, or for the human, or for the coder, or what's reflected in the machine is actually what is reflected of us. So that's kind of always where it comes back to as well.
I'm wondering, like, this brings to mind like whether there is kind of two types of recursive loops or feedback. There's one type where the more something feeding on itself, and then there is increasing the breeze, and like the noise keeps growing. And there's another type where it shrinks down to nothing. So it's like when you start pouring, you have 2 glasses of water, and one is empty, one is full, and you pour the water from one to the other, and the end is empty. And it would be nice to imagine the opposite image, like you have 2 empty glass of water and they somehow fill up. I don't know. I wonder if at some point there is an essential change of paradigm that instead of going in one direction, it goes in the other direction. That was a question that I asked to Joel and in conversation, because I was wondering, is there something essentially, I mean, the mechanization of labor processes and has been going on for centuries, and there's been some ways of working around it through this noise that somehow happened to this excess, and the question is whether in this digital turn, things turn it essentially different, or maybe not. I don't know, because when things turn, if it's true they really turn essentially different, then the stuff starts really to disappear, and you don't really have any more this sort of the debris and dust to work with that can be really fertile.
I might turn that.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you go, Justin. Go.
Oh no, I do think there's something really different about the situation we're in, even though I guess everyone says it, but also none of us are really able to place ourselves properly with it. But I mean, I just have a formula for it really, which is, you know, like it's as stupid as it gets, but you know, the Neolithic sort of revolution was the expropriation of land. The capitalist revolution was that of labor, and the digital revolution is the expropriation of our language as such, right? And I guess that's my stupid formula for trying to just sort of capture how extreme it is where we are now.
Yeah, it's on sometimes if. Like along this path, I wonder if you can go back to a much older dichotomy into spoken and written, and in a way, I mean, I know it's really stupid to think in dichotomies, and reality is much more complex. But in this case, I think what if this is all about turning stuff that's spoken into something that has written record, and when stuff has a written record, you can be all accountable for it, and it can be counted as a quantity, becomes a quantity. Whether when it's spoken is in the air, it's sort of, it has this fleeting. So in this case, it's a massive writification of reality, like everything gets written down somewhere. But maybe it's just a stupid simplification. But when you make your example about Socrates, I just wonder, yeah, you're talking about what philosophers were writing. And in fact, Socrates never wrote anything. It didn't work anyway. But so I don't know. Maybe it's not enough as an analysis. We should think in new paradigm. But something on this kind pops to my mind.
That might be a good moment to to wrap things up, because it's been 2.5 hours, and it's been amazing to spend this time with all of you, and not just tonight, but like over the last few weeks, talking about this project and working on it together. Can
I just jump in on that, just to say that like I've learned so much tonight. I mean, I think the thing is the machine listening project is, we've been calling it a curriculum like all along, and that's partly because, you know, well, I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but my point is that like this instrument is, we definitely are thinking of as a form of pedagogy, and that like to work with the instrument, to think with the instrument, and to work and think with people who are working and thinking with the instrument is a form of research. And yeah, it's clarifying. It's like having an object in your hand. I mean, you know, the black box, like Mehak's point about the black box sort of going infinitely deep, right? So that we're not tinkering really with the black box, because, you know, where's the data set, and where's the politics and the social context around the data set, and so on and so on. But there's something about having the instrument to orient these conversations around that's been really helpful and clarifying and productive, and thinking about, you know, breaking or doing otherwise with the, you know, the systems that have been expropriated from us. So yeah, it's just to say that it's been a pleasure to learn and think with you all, and I hope we'll be able to keep doing that. We should say a few thank yous, Joel, to all the panelists, but to a bunch of other people. I mean, we should probably get Sean to pop his head up again, since he's really the brains behind the instrument. And is Robert here?
I can see Sean's head already popped up, but yeah.
I thought it popped.
Yeah. Robert's in the chat, but Robert Ochshorn.
Maybe Lauren, who you could invite Robert Ochshorn, who's just piped in the chat to turn his camera on and if he wants to, and microphone, and join the panel for a moment, because Robert deserves a lot of recognition, acknowledgement as part of the team at Reduct, whose collaboration with us has made this possible. And we are actually going to go out with an amazing work that Robert shared with us just a few hours ago, an operatic work, in fact. But before we do that, let's thank Lauren Squire, who's produced this whole event behind the scenes and brought all of run everything incredibly smoothly and is amazing. Sam Carmex, who's been doing the live stream, the team at Liquid Architecture, Elisa Blakeney, who's been in the chats, Debris Facility, who's designed the background slides and many of the graphics for tonight, and the Machine Listening Project in general. And also, of course, the teams at Unsound, Mikhail, who's put together an amazing discourse program, and Matt and Gosha behind the festival itself. It's really a privilege to be able to be part of the Unsound Festival and collaborate with you guys in this way. So it's been amazing.
Also Zoe DeLuca, who's done so much research and writing and web assistance for the project.
And also Laura McLean and all of the Capture All cohort too. So it's a big group of collaborators. If you go to the Machine Listening website, you'll see kind of lots of people's work that has all been brought together in this kind of collective investigation and experiment. And so Robert, hi, thanks for being with us in, I think, what is the middle of the night in California, or it was the middle of the night when we started. It might even be early morning now. And you have shared a piece with us, and as soon as we looked at it a few hours ago, we thought this is the closing credits, because it sort of seemed to just pull all of the different elements together in an amazing sort of grand finale. So I don't know if you want to kind of lead us into the outro by saying something about what you've produced.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much of it, but I just taking a lot of things at once, as you say, it is wrapping, but I thought it would be nice to try to get the experience of using some of the material that we were looking at earlier as a database that could be mapped into a different context. And so it's a kind of a very basic A to B, matching experiment of matching sounds from one source to another. But also has a kind of effect to it.
And it has the epic quality of an opera.
It does.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us. Enjoy Robert's piece, and we'll see you all next time, and be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Im Keller allein diese 60.000 Pfund liegen, oder sind sie tausend
and it even the record part. This is another their system thing.
Our work Bishop 3.
Another example. Different.
They operate.
It's between expert and computing.
Many pages.
That sound alike.
And message.
Right.
Of the
And my
what is in the segments
set
as their candidate store is all consistent with our argument. Top line shows the envelope. Tized. Segment. Score of 7. Candidate 7.
Speak.
Token. With the fricative. Purple. Machine 2. Thinks the candidate to be is 7.
Time not to have tomato juice.
Recognize.
Or
Checking account.
Computers.
Tell me all about China.
conform to the
Tell me all about China. Tomato juice.
100 million computers.
Vodka and tomato. Tell me all about
Compute.
Would you like
Part 85. The system had to turn process. Required system. Pick up pain. Not passing. It consists
Your checking account currently has
5 of them. Okay. Graphs is up.
business motto.
Because our
This is tell me all about
2. Beta times gamma. Alpha. And then path. Avoid trial to pass. Additive pass.
These
Single state to the end. Make you different grammar. All possible. Content. Path. Comes standard. All more languages path. And friction followed by means which means unambiguous. Just rest of sudden and classes of statements which went on the grammar.
talk fast.
Let me choose a it's followed too high. Time operation very
Tell me all about
Dangerous.
all the topological heartbeat.
It's an experiment project of its kind.
What I like to do is
Example.
operation
So the
Recognition.
live of an output
of 70%.
IBM. And this is an experiment.
Could be done. Acceptable for the time being. Trial. And the candidate parameters themselves. Option.
album, but now
Help. Of course.
tells me that 40 colorless yellow
Oriented grammar within knowledge about a computer. Such stores all